Number 9. Roxanne and Foxy team up. Some believe that Roxanne and Foxy are in cahoots, and it's actually through her appearance that we will get to see Foxy as well. What are Roxanne and Foxy up to is the question. Why do they need to team up? It could be that the animatronics are still competing to catch Gregory, and Foxy will show up to help Roxanne in her time of need. If this is true, do you think Roxanne will be more or less successful because of Foxy's help? Could Foxy perhaps not be willing to help Roxanne and be forced to team up with her under duress? Is it possible that Foxy is being held captive and this team up isn't something that they're really willing to do? Or could it just be that Foxy decided to take a back seat to let his friend Roxanne shine bright in the spotlight? Maybe that's why Foxy just retired from the music career and was like, Roxanne, you got it, girl. Number 8. The competition. Alternatively, what if Roxanne actually got rid of Foxy? She could have started out as more of a background character at Freddy's Mega Pizzaplex, and perhaps it was due to jealousy that Foxy disappeared. Instead of it being a corporate decision, perhaps the Foxy animatronic just one day went missing, which prompted Roxanne to get a promotion. Oh, how convenient. This could very well mean that there is, or at least was, a Glamrock Foxy. Perhaps instead of seeing Glamrock Foxy whole in this game, we will only learn of what happened to him via the story in the game, and instead find his spare parts and remains, which Roxanne attempted to dispose of. I'm just saying, if you get to take a close look at Roxanne's area in the Pizzaplex, which I think we will get to do, maybe look out for any tufts of fur or a bedazzled eye patch that could be hidden somewhere nearby. It was Roxanne. Roxanne murdered Foxy. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about Security Breach or more lists about Foxy, be sure to let us know in the comments below and hit that thumbs up. Every time you hit that thumbs up, it just means that we get closer to Security Breach. I can hear Steel Wool being like, it's almost coming out, hit like more.
And it's 7 out of control. This may sound insane, but could the animatronics actually know what they're doing, or could this just be their agony acting out? Quote from Dr. Phineas Taggart from Fazbear Fights Book 3, 1:35 AM's epilogue. Quote, that you can take a saturation of agony, add any kind of intelligence, even an artificial one, and they will combine together to transmute the energy of emotion into the energy of physical action. So it seems that Phineas believes that the emotion is what dictates the actions, hence why transmuting the emotion into physical action, not even the individual who the emotions came from. This could explain the rash behavior of the animatronics and why they seem like they're in pain. It's not the children necessarily controlling them, it's their agony. The actual spirits don't have any reasoning behind their movements, they just do what they do. That's why Elizabeth wants to make her dad proud, because while in agony we can't really think straight, we're impulsive creatures. It's our animalistic nature. That's what's going on with these animatronics. And we know that Phineas must have been right since he proves his thesis by creating the Stitch Wraith, which promptly kills him because it's full of agony of multiple different things, not a single person. That also explains why all of a sudden these kids that possess these animatronics are capable of murder. Hot damn. And it's 6 sound discs. The sound discs that use frequency to modify what you see have seemingly appeared in the game world before. We guessed that they were on the Funtime animatronics, thanks to the Funtime Freddy repairs section where you must remove the power module from his chest. But what could this disc be doing? Why would it need to be there? Some consider this proof that the twisted animatronics exist in the game world, and this is backed up by the pile of dirt that you can see at the Midnight Motorist minigame. However, some also believe that this pins the Funtime animatronics as the twisted ones, which could make sense, given that Ballora is an absolute nightmare with a dump truck the size of Texas. But the fact that she walks on all fours despite being a ballerina is concerning to say the least. What do you think? Are the Funtime animatronics the twisted ones, or was that disc really just a power module? And if it was, why is Afton using it to power animatronics and not make millions powering the world as well? If you have money, you can do whatever you want. You wouldn't have to worry about the cops. Just saying. Halfway through and at number 5, Bonnie is Freddy. There are some FNAF community members who seem to think that Bonnie looks awfully similar to Freddy, and it's something that I kind of picked up on as well during my analysis of the FNAF 3 bad ending. Their facial structure is relatively similar, especially when compared to Chica or Foxy's. But why could this be? Well, probably because of FNAF 2. The withered animatronics are meant to be the original ones, however, Bonnie's is missing his face. It's believed that when FNAF 2 ends and the toy animatronics are scrapped, they repair the originals, hence why we can see them him in the first FNAF game. But since Bonnie is missing his face, they have to make a new one, and they use Freddy's face as a form of template to recreate the Bonnie one. So that's why they have some features that look the same or have, I guess, an essence of Freddy. I mean, it could absolutely be what happened, given that the toy version of Bonnie is so different from the original. But I mean, it's probably just because a similar model was used, or that they were made by the same guy. That would also make a lot of sense. And at 4, Shadow Animatronics. There are quite a few theories revolving around the Shadow Animatronics first introduced in FNAF 2. We don't quite know exactly what they are, or why they guide us around FNAF 3's minigames, but multiple people have come up with potential answers. The most common one being that they are Springlock victims, that employees wore the Spring Bonnie and Spring Freddy suits and were subjected to a Springlock failure that killed them, because, you know, that's usually what happens unless you're possessed by one of your victims. But that doesn't really explain why they don't possess the animatronics and rather create shadow versions. Another is that they're actually the ejected souls of other possessed animatronics. For example, that Shadow Freddy is actually the soul of Crying Child, who was pushed out of Golden Freddy when William killed Cassidy. But we are unsure of who Shadow Bonnie would actually be, especially given their appearance across multiple games, because, you know, Shadow Bonnie still appears in FNAF AR. And one final theory is that these are different emotions, since we learned that what we call possession in the FNAF universe is actually the extreme power of agony latching onto objects and not letting go. Like I said, thanks to Dr. Phineas Taggart in the Fazbear Frights epilogues. What do you think the Shadow Animatronics are though? Be sure you let me know down below. I personally think that it's other emotions, but that would also have to be a retcon since Scott wouldn't really know about that when they were added in the first place, but hey, it's an explanation.
Number 3, inspired by. What if we have this all backwards? What if instead of Foxy being modded into a Roxanne, Roxanne was actually the inspiration for Foxy? We all believe we know that this game takes place and that it is set more in the present day. But this could just be a red herring. After all, you can't ignore the extremely 80s theme of this game's aesthetic. What if Security Breach is actually set in the 1980s? Is it possible then that Roxanne could be the earlier incarnation of Foxy, the animatronic who actually inspired everyone's favorite fox? This timeline, after all, is pretty wonky for FNAF, and we know there wasn't a Foxy at Fredbear's. Is Freddy's Mega Pizzaplex then potentially a location that existed on the timeline between Fredbear's and Freddy's? Could it possibly have existed prior to Foxy's creation? I mean, it seems unlikely, but it could be possible. I'm just saying. Number 2, Bite of 87. The Bite of 87 is still a hot debate topic amongst FNAF fans. We don't really know who is behind it. Many have speculated, however, that Foxy makes a lot of sense as a prime suspect. 1, he's got super sharp teeth, which instantly makes him suspicious, and 2, he also seems to be off to the side when we see him in the first game, with his own Pirate's Cove kinda like out of order. Why is this? Could it be because Foxy was responsible for the Bite of 87? And if Security Breach is later in the timeline, is it possible that Foxy was taken out of the group, thrown away, and eliminated because he was the one behind the bite? Which would make sense. They'd be like, we don't want animatronics that bite people. We also don't want bunny animatronics because all the murders. Number 1, Foxy has left the chat. Of course, one of the most scary theories that I can think of for Foxy in regards to Security Breach is that my favorite animatronic will not be appearing there. Sure, there is definitely going to be Glamrock Chica, who I also love dearly, but Foxy is honestly my favorite animatronic, and I think Foxy is also a favorite animatronic for many other fans out there too. So this would definitely be a travesty were it to be true. The reality is we really haven't seen anything in the trailer to suggest that Foxy will most definitely be appearing. All in all, he's been pretty absent. And while Roxanne is cool, not having Foxy in this game would be completely depressing and horrifying as a fan. Only time will tell, however, and hopefully we will get at least a very small hint of Foxy somewhere, at least a little Easter egg, please. At the very least, I just want something on the same level as Bonnie Bowl, in case that's all we also get of Bonnie. I don't know what it would be for Foxy. I want what I really want is I want a place where you can polish hooks and buy hooks, but I don't know why I want that. It's not like a fun thing you would do at an arcade. It's just a weird thing that I associate with Foxy. Number 10, 2 Fredbears. Some believe the Golden Freddy is one Fredbear, whereas Nightmare is another Fredbear. The theory also suggests that both of these animatronics have ties to, or were once a version of Fredbear. So both in a sense are Fredbear while also being separate from him. They are all collectively Fredbears, but also their own entity. The question remains, of course, if there are two Fredbears, have they always both existed, or was only one of them the original Fredbear? It is possible that although we have only ever seen one Fredbear on the screen at a time, there could be multiple Fredbears out there who each evolved to become something different, with one of them becoming known as Golden Freddy and the other becoming known as the more ghostly version Yellow Bear, who then perhaps goes on to become Nightmare. Number 9. Many Fredbears. It has been theorized that there is more than one Spring Bonnie suit. Some fans believe the original suit was actually locked away or destroyed, whereas the other suit that would go on to become Springtrap in William Afton's prison was actually his own personal suit. Then again, we also have seen what appears to be a slightly different version of a bunny costume, which could also be a version of Spring Bonnie in the Help Wanted game, which is worn by the entity we know as Glitchtrap. If there are multiple Spring Bonnies, it seems more than likely that there are multiple Fredbear animatronics out there, or even potentially Springlock suit versions of Fredbear. I'm not sure if Fredbear is a Springlock or not, but could be. If so, that would play well into the previous theory of there being multiple versions of Fredbear who evolved to be different entities and potentially even different Golden Freddys. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about Fredbear and all of the possible theories out there as to who Fredbear could be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. The star of the show. What if Fredbear isn't Golden Freddy but another famous bear that we all know very well? That's right, what if Fredbear is actually Freddy Fazbear? I know that these two bears look very different, I know, but it could be possible that Golden Freddy is a completely separate animatronic and instead Freddy is the one who was once Fredbear. The evidence we have for this is the commonality between the two characters. Fredbear was the star and title character of Fredbear's Diner. Freddy Fazbear is the star and title character of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Could it then be possible that Fredbear was actually transformed or remodeled into something completely new, or something sort of new? Instead of being tossed away or relegated to the shadows, what if Fredbear was given a new look and new name as time went on and instead became Freddy Fazbear? Number 7. Friends at Last. Of course, being a big Foxy fan, you know I want this to happen. I want it to happen so bad. Perhaps Foxy is not featured in the trailer but is present in the game as an ally to us, which might explain their lack of appearance there. After all, we don't want to spoil it if animatronics can be our allies in the game, which has already kind of been hinted at perhaps with Montgomery Gator, and perhaps all the parts with Foxy in the game would make that way too obvious. It has been theorized before that some of the animatronics may provide a hiding spot for Gregory, allowing him to move around inside the animatronic and go undetected. Some think one or many of these animatronics could be helping you. What if one of them is Foxy? Foxy could be hiding behind the scenes or have his own special area that he's relegated to that we just haven't seen yet. And Foxy could very well be an animatronic that simply isn't chasing us, but is actually for reals this time, finally our friend. Finally just coming to check in on us. Number 6. Love Affair. A lot of people have noticed just how similar Roxanne and Foxy seem to look, which has many fans theorizing about if the pair could actually be related somehow. Granted, Foxy is a fox and Roxanne is a wolf, but they are similar enough that some think that Roxanne might actually be the reason for both Foxy and Bonnie's potential absence in Security Breach. This is because they believe that Roxanne is actually the child of Foxy and Bonnie, who are in love with each other. I mean, this is the internet and this is FNAF, so any relationship mashups could of course be possible and likely have been shipped somewhere out on the internet and have countless fans of them. I personally think if Roxanne is their offspring together, that it might actually make sense that they don't appear. I'm not sure how in love Foxy and Bonnie were or are, but in the technical sense this makes sense. Roxanne may have actually been built from Bonnie and Foxy's spare parts, being their child in the sense that she was made from them, born of them if you will. However, that would also mean that we definitely won't be seeing Foxy in this game, as the animatronic would have had to give up its own existence to give life to Roxanne. Number 5. The Foxy Upgrade. Some fans believe that the other animatronics in the game can only run because they received what is referred to as a Foxy Upgrade. After all, in FNAF 1 and even throughout the franchise, Foxy has really been the only animatronic that has been known for moving super quickly and simply just sprinting towards you. Some even believed that this was simply because Foxy was running to try and save you or check up on you, hence the urgency in their movement. But Scott Cawthon, of course, dismissed that theory. We were all like, Foxy's our friend! And Scott was like, not your friend, nope. Foxy's sprint mechanic makes them unique and also at times one of the most shocking and frightening animatronics to be jump scared by in-game. Imagine how much scarier Security Breach will be if all animatronics can run and sprint as fast as Foxy. And from the trailer, it looks like they'll be able to. Whether or not this is an upgrade from Foxy or elsewhere, it seems this is an ability that will be common. Number 4. Modded Foxy. What if Roxanne wasn't always Roxanne, but was instead Foxy but heavily modded? After all, initially when we were looking at silhouettes, we all thought that Roxanne was going to be Foxy, and the fact that Foxy is missing in the Security Breach lineup seems to suggest that Foxy might actually indeed just be Roxanne. Or rather, Roxanne is instead a super modded Foxy? But why? Well, this could be due to Freddy's just wanting to refresh with branding, or simply not liking the overall design of Foxy and wanting to change it because they felt it was too, I don't know, outdated? Me, I think pirates will always be cool, but perhaps not everybody at Fazbear Entertainment who works in branding and marketing shares my love of all things pirate forever. Yar. Number 3. Teleportation. Let's say that Fredbear is Golden Freddy. In that case, this would mean that either in death or possibly also just in life, if the animatronic is still considered to exist and not be a ghost, that Fredbear can teleport. At least that would be true if 1. You believe that Golden Freddy and Fredbear are one in the same, and 2. If you believe that Golden Freddy could teleport. Based on the fact that Golden Freddy is kind of a bonus animatronic in the first game who doesn't so much move into the office as simply randomly appear there, and also in FNAF 2 kind of also randomly appears places, many believe that Golden Freddy is actually capable of teleportation. Now, is this a ghost skill though, or is it something that has always been built into the suit? Well, based on FNAF 2, I think we would assume it was the suit. If it was always around, that means these suits in general are capable of being a lot more deadly and terrifying than we could have ever imagined. Talk about state of the art. Number 2. The Flesh Remains. Some believe that Crying Child, and not Cassidy, possesses Golden Freddy and thereby Fredbear. However, it's also possible that the two could share the animatronic, or that Fredbear is possessed by Cece whereas Golden Freddy is possessed by Cassidy alone. Crying Child, however, is intrinsically linked to Fredbear due to the bite of 83. Crying Child is very much believed to be the victim of that bite, and it was Fredbear who of course did the biting. We see this take place in a cutscene featured in FNAF 4. While Crying Child doesn't seem to have been stuffed into the animatronic suit like other victims, at least from what we know. I don't think Cece ever ends up stuffed in that suit unless we've never seen that before. Part of their brain was, however, lost in the bite, which would mean that there was some flesh left behind to imbue the suit with their spirit. Of course, would that be enough flesh to imbue with the spirit? That's a topic for debate. Number 1. Nightmare. Regardless of whether or not you believe there are multiple Golden Freddys or multiple Fredbears, which are perhaps all Golden Freddys, it seems very likely that Fredbear is Nightmare, or that Nightmare is meant to represent Fredbear. If the Nightmare animatronics are more manifestations of fear and not real physical animatronics. If FNAF 4 is all about Crying Child, like many believe, who is critically injured by Fredbear and later dies of his injuries, then it makes sense that one of the scariest animatronics in the games, Nightmare, is meant to represent Fredbear. Ergo, these animatronics become one and the same.
Inattent possession. This theory comes from Sebi and stuff on the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza fandom page, and they seem to think that the daycare attendant is possessed, saying, quote, "Okay, so, as in the FNAF 3 bad ending, we see all the souls in the eyes of the animatronics with 2 lights in the Golden Freddy head," a theory which I've already disproven since Crying Child, who is presumed to be the other soul, shouldn't have been introduced yet. This has turned into a theory about Golden Freddy having 2 spirits inside of them, though now I wanted to bring up who else has 2 white eyes, the daycare attendant. Now those eyes don't necessarily glow, but they are two blank and empty white eyes, and there are two forms of this animatronic. Two forms, two spirits. Now in Security Breach there is a new form to show that the animatronics are possessed, and it's glowing red eyes as a part of the blob. Afton is the excuse since his eyes are purple because obviously he's Afton. Now again, there is something that's part of the daycare attendant that shows his possession feature. The Moondrop animatronic has glowing red eyes. End quote. This leads Sebi to conclude that the daycare attendant is possessed by two different spirits. And while this certainly is interesting, I don't think that it would be the case. The daycare attendant doesn't actually have enough of a role in the game to be one of, if not the only possessed animatronic in the game. And again, I've already disproven the 2-eye theory from FNAF 3's bad ending. Link to that video is in the icon. In at 9, the arcade conspiracy. This theory comes from Reddit user Averdict_AV on the game theory subreddit discussing Sundrop and their glitching arcade game. This is because I really like the daycare attendant Sundrop and the fact that he is not dangerous and lethal to Gregory, which seems not to be discussed much, but I might have a theory regarding that. My thought is that when we look at the Balloon Boy arcade in Sundrop's room, the Balloon World cabinet, I think it is important that, well, firstly, it's one of the few playable arcade cabinets in the game, but also features a very glitchy section and a glitchy Sundrop. Specifically, only Sundrop was glitched in that game, even though Moondrop and Sundrop are both present within the game. I think this is the reason why Sundrop was not hostile and lethal. I believe that the glitch or the hacks done by presumably Vanny or Gregory to some people that were meant for Sundrop were trapped in that arcade machine. There isn't a glitch Moondrop in the arcade because the glitch or the hack actually got to Moondrop, turning them into a dangerous animatronic. That was meant to turn Sundrop dangerous, but it didn't go through and somehow got stuck in the arcade. When we look at all the other animatronic specific arcade games, not Princess Quest, there is only Monty that is playable, but it does not feature any glitches at all. It just calls back to previous game locations. This is because I believe that the glitch got to Monty already. But if I want to interject here and throw in the fact that the arcade conspiracy note mentions that Chica has an arcade game that's glitching and so does Monty, maybe this theory has a little more juice to it. In at 8, name drop. Get it? Actually, wait, you won't get it yet. You will. Coming from Reddit user The Wizard Muss on the FNAF Theories Reddit page, quote, I find it really interesting that the daycare attendant doesn't have a proper character name, especially given their large enough attractions to advertise with, and in this series most of the animatronics have a proper name unless they're a part of a large group, the Mini-Renas, the Biddy Bats, etc. Music Man would have to be the exception to that until Security Breach, now a fair number of them, but I don't know, maybe there's supposed to be multiple daycare attendants? The Pizzaplex is big enough that the daycare would have a lot of kids, and one animatronic probably wouldn't be able to bounce around a group of 20 or so. The only thing that makes me question that is that the parent emails are in the singular when addressing the daycare attendant because they're only dealing with one. I'm pretty sure that Freddy also only refers to one attendant. End quote. And while the character is seemingly called Sundrop and Moondrop, those are also the names of candy that they're advertising. So it might be confusing, maybe they're not actually intended to be named those. But it's also interesting to think that no character actually calls them by those names. But Freddy does mention the names of the other animatronics, so maybe there are meant to be more than one, or that the situation is more complex than we realize, or dare I say the situation is mega complex. Get it? Mega Pizzaplex.
Number 7. Fredbear is Fredbear. Even more terrifying would be the theory that Golden Freddy and Fredbear are actually separate entities, same with Freddy and Fredbear, and that Fredbear is actually a completely unique animatronic. Now, why would this be so scary? Well, it would mean so many of us were wrong in our theories, especially the theories about Fredbear being Golden Freddy. It would also mean that there are even more animatronics potentially roaming around out there. That is assuming that Fredbear is still active. If Fredbear was active though, that is one more animatronic to worry about, one more anthropomorphic bear animatronic too. Does that make it more scary? I don't know, but bears in the wild are certainly scary to run into, so perhaps bear animatronics are also more vicious and terrifying by comparison. I know not too many people are afraid of Freddy out there in the world, but I'm just saying, bears are pretty scary creatures. You do not want to fight a bear. Number 6. Golden Freddy. Golden Freddy is a much more popular character than Fredbear when it comes to the fan base, and perhaps that is why the community has tried to give Fredbear more meaning by tying them more closely to Golden Freddy. The evidence cited for these two being one and the same ultimately comes down to appearances. Golden Freddy appears to look similar to Fredbear, and the animatronic is in a state of disrepair, which many think could be because Fredbear is such an old animatronic. Fredbear is also thought of as a yellow bear ultimately, and so is Golden Freddy. In fact, Golden Freddy in the first game has the file name Yellow Bear, so while it's not anything super concrete, a color is a color, and that's a fact. Number 5. Cassidy. There are so many theories when it comes to who exactly possesses Golden Freddy, whom some believe to be Fredbear. One such theory is that Cassidy is the one who possesses the lesser seen animatronic. Cassidy is a bit of a confusing character, but is ultimately one of the people, if not the only person, that fans theorize is possessing Golden Freddy. At least, if we're talking about the games. Once you include the books, it gets a heck of a lot more complicated, because in the books there are other characters associated with Golden Freddy, and kind of multiple characters too, if we're talking about Fazbear Frights and then the novel trilogy as well. Number 4. Destroyed. What if Fredbear isn't anyone because the animatronic actually doesn't even exist anymore? At least, not in a physical sense. Many people theorize after Fredbear's role in the Bite of 83 that the animatronic was completely scrapped and destroyed. If that were to be true, it opens up a whole other realm of spooky possibilities. What if Fredbear wasn't repurposed or didn't evolve to become a new entity but is simply a ghost? This would help to explain some other mysterious things that we know about Fredbear. Or I suppose possibly Golden Freddy. After all, what if Golden Freddy was still Fredbear in disrepair and then later Fredbear after death? What if that's what Golden Freddy is?
And at 3, the light. Coming from user ChickNugs on Twitter, they believe that Gregory would actually have been safer with Sundrop in the daycare rather than with Freddy. Quote, unpopular opinion, Gregory was perfectly safe and okay to stay with Sun until 6 AM. Sun most likely would have protected him against anyone else, although Freddy was more caring and thoughtful of what Gregory desired than Sun. Yet it would have been annoying to stay with Sun and be forced to play, but it was undeniably the safest option, apart from staying trapped in Freddy's chest cavity and doing until 6 AM as Freddy recharged the entire time. And which, you know what, it's actually a fairly valid point. I'd still say that being in Freddy's green room and sleeping through the night was the best option, since Vanessa never thought to look in there, only figuring out that they were working together after hearing the Fazwatch call out in Freddy's voice. However, this makes another Twitter user going by the name Dante Loyal suggest that the whole he'd be safe with Sundrop thing is the reason the lights get turned off in the first place, and that Vanny was probably the one to do it so that Gregory wouldn't end up being safe. But ultimately, in at number 2, multiple daycare attendants. Now, we kind of touched on this earlier, but there's actually evidence in the game that can kind of help us. Now, we only see one daycare attendant at a time, but there is the possibility that there are multiple within the Pizzaplex. One indication to this possibility is actually within the daycare itself. See, if Gregory tries to return to the daycare after being thrown out, the daycare attendant, as Sundrop, will appear in the slide and throw him out once again. However, the other animatronics will not come if this happens. Interestingly enough though, this can still happen even when Moon is the dominant personality and running around the Pizzaplex, meaning that even if the Moon animatronic is right behind you at the top of the hour, you can still try and get into the daycare and be rejected by Sun, suggesting that there are more than one of this character. But the game is imperfect and there are glitches galore, so we cannot confirm this as an impossibility or a confirmation. So looks like, as per usual in the FNAF series, all we have is idle speculation and propositions rather than any actual solid statements. Wonderful. It's like the FNAF series has IBS with its lore. And finally, in at number 1, aw man. A customer complaint in one of the lore duffel bags that you can find throughout the Pizzaplex has an angry parent revealing that their child, who previously had no sleep-related issues, has begun refusing to sleep with the lights off and started wetting the bed after being left in the daycare. It is implied that said child has been traumatized by the daycare attendant's moon form. But what could this thing have done to traumatize this kid if they were within the confines of the daycare? Sure, when we get the lights off, we get some psycho dude trying to kill us, but when it's an actual daycare session, why is it so traumatizing? Well, that's where the name and number comes in. Yeah, you see, in the daycare attendant mods video, I mentioned multiple times how this dude gives me Chris Hansen conversation need-in vibes. And the easiest way to say this without YouTube getting mad is by saying creeper Aw man, that's right, he's a creeper. I think we all know where I'm going with this. I mean, Son seriously grabs you and then forces you to play with him, and if you try to leave, he will pick you up and put you right back in your place during the first part of this boss battle. So, I mean, like, if this dude was going around making kids feel uncomfortable and then ruining their innocence, I would expect it. So, yeah, don't put your kids in the FNAF daycare. And at 10, who was the first? The first victim who possesses an animatronic is a question we all thought we knew the answer to. Multiple times, actually. Since at first we thought it was the puppet, which is understandable, since from the beginning the puppet has really been guiding the other animatronics and trying to bring them to a peaceful rest, like we see in the Happiest Day minigame from FNAF 3. And we stuck with this assumption until Ultimate Custom Night came along and blew our brains out with this one simple line. Quote, "I was the first. I have seen everything." That line, while becoming a bit of a meme, at least on this channel, has caused us to think that now maybe Chica, or I guess Susie, was the first victim. This could be the case, however, some would argue that this only means that she was the first of the missing children rather than the first victim of William Afton, which also makes sense and makes things cleaner in my opinion, because like, why would the puppet be so special if they weren't the first? What do you think? Let me know down in the comments. And at 9, Baby is the villain. After FNAF 6, you'd think that Baby would be done for, kaput, destroyed, burned in the eternal fire. Yet in Fazbear Frights we end up seeing the return of Baby, and even as the villain, helping her father but then bailing once she realizes that he was about to lose. So some believe that perhaps the scrap Baby we see in FNAF 6 was either not the true Elizabeth Afton, or that some of her remnants still exists out there, like the FNAF version of a Horcrux, allowing her to continue living, even if most of her is destroyed. Which honestly, for this series doesn't sound too far-fetched anymore. But that also brings up an interesting point. Would that actually work? Like, is it like a supernatural ghost where you need to burn all the remnants of the body to get rid of the spirit? Or if most of the remnant is destroyed, is that good enough? And if Baby does return, will she be like her father and become the new main villain? After all, we hear Elizabeth say that she wanted to make her daddy proud in FNAF 6's ending speech. Also, by the way, if you call anyone daddy, they're allowed to write you as a dependent on their taxes. And at 8, secret animatronics. Are there characters in the FNAF world that are secretly animatronics? It's a question we didn't really think we'd have to ask, but then came in the novels with the revelation that the main character has been a robot this whole time and didn't even know it herself, which is absolutely insane. And not only that, but the latest Fazbear Frights book called Friendly Faces also introduces a similar idea, where in an attempt to resurrect a dead friend, someone sends their cat's hair to Fazbear Entertainment to purchase a robotic version of this pet, even if it goes horribly wrong. Either way, could there secretly be characters in the FNAF series that are already robots? Phone Guy, our player character, maybe characters we haven't even really met, like the mother of the Afton kids. Could she have just been a fake mother and William adopted his kids? Could Henry secretly be an animatronic? It's a question that we will never really have an answer to, but my guess is probably not. Well, unless it's Michael. And at 7, pain. At me making these lists. Is it possible that the daycare attendant actually feels physical pain when transforming? It seems unlikely, but still possible due to the seemingly agonizing screams we hear while Sun transforms into Moon during that cutscene. Fun fact, the animatronic doesn't actually switch. In that cutscene there are 2 different models, which is why the character falls behind the desk. The only time we actually see the model change between the 2 is in the Freddy and Friends cartoon. However, is it possible for animatronics to feel pain? It's unclear. I mean, we completely decimate 3 out of the 5 animatronics in the Pizzaplex and they seemingly feel no pain through it, fighting until the very end and then beyond. But Roxy is also programmed for emotional pain, at least on the surface level it appears to be like that. But does this mean that they could have programmed emotional pain and physical pain? We don't know. Maybe the daycare attendant did something wrong, so now switching to the Moon form is painful. Or maybe when he's forcefully changed it's painful, or it could just be that Sun is just fighting to stay in control over Moon, but the change in lighting is just too powerful for him, and that's what that is. He's fighting. Ah! And at 6, Puppet 2.0. There is a theory that I've seen on TikTok. I can't remember who made it for the life of me, okay? I try and wipe all other exposure to FNAF out of my memory as fast as possible, especially when it's on TikTok. I don't want FNAF to invade my TikTok. However, this theory stuck with me, and it's the idea that the daycare attendant is a new form of the puppet animatronic first seen in FNAF 2, which is interesting and kind of plausible. I mean, we know that the puppet was meant to be a security bot, and the daycare attendant acts very much like a security guard until the lights go off. And when he kicks us out, he does call for security, and then every hour he roams the Pizzaplex like security, but there's still more to it than that. The Moondrop form of the daycare attendant also flies around on wires, much like a marionette would. Marionette being another word for puppet, but specifically a puppet on strings, which is something also often associated with the puppet from FNAF 2. I mean, how else could they jump from the prize counter to your office? They don't need the strings to move, but they both use the strings to get around quickly when they need to, which is also something that's pointed out on the villain's fandom page for the daycare attendant. So maybe it's something that we should be considering. Like I guess we need a surrogate puppet after all, now that Charlotte's put to rest, don't we? No, we don't. Halfway through into number 5, Half Infected. This theory comes to us from Love Nathan Carr on the Game Theory subreddit and proposes an idea as to how just the Moondrop side of the daycare attendant got infected with the Afton virus. Here's a quote from their post. Sundrop seems to be the only one that has no history from what I've seen with the virus. As shown in what behavior he does partake in, he appears to cry when we go missing, he cleans up the place, he tries to entertain us, and he tries to keep us out of trouble. He does not partake in attempting to kill or capture us like the others. The reason behind this is Sundrop and Moondrop are two entities in one body. They have different coding. So let's say the story before the virus came to all the animatronics is that the mall is dark for the entire night because Moondrop is not a problem. He doesn't try to hurt anyone. But then Vanny shows up, and since the animatronics were most likely infected at night, it would make a decent amount of sense. The two sides have different functions and would therefore require separate programming, at least if they are two halves of one whole animatronic. And there's not multiple of them like we discussed earlier. In at 4, Look Out. Now this is a separate theory that I found within the Love Nathan Carr post on the Game Theory subreddit that I wanted to address separately, so quote from later on in that same post, actually it's right after I ended the last quote. The night the virus came, Moondrop was infected with the other animatronics, leaving them with a lust to kill or kidnap. Sundrop figures this out, and at some point he brings it up to the proper authorities. So they make the daycare and the Pizzaplex constantly lit to stop Moondrop. This is where Sundrop gets scared of the lights turning off, as people will get hurt if it happens, end quote. So this user seems to be suggesting that Sundrop knows what Moondrop is doing and tries to stop it from happening, which could explain why he's fighting to stay in control when the lights go out. I don't know, it's certainly an interesting concept, but it relies more on conjecture and assumption rather than evidence, so I'm gonna have to say objection, hearsay on that one. Getting close to the end into number 3, Afton Robotics. Could the entire Afton family be robots? Well, at least not at first, but at the end they most certainly were. Mrs. Afton, or the baby mama, ended up becoming Ballora. Maybe not in a literal sense, because Ballora doesn't really appear to be possessed, but Ballora is certainly meant to represent the mother or be a surrogate mother after her death or divorce. Elizabeth gets turned into baby after getting scooped and possessing her, which is evident based on her changing eye color. Michael at the very least gets stuffed with Ennard if he wasn't a robot from the beginning, much like Charlie from the FNAF novels. Crying Child gets put in the hospital by Fredbear that has the plug pulled on him, meaning that he was being kept alive by machines, but also William says that he will put him back together, which could mean becoming a robot. And William himself. He becomes not only Springtrap, getting shoved full of metal parts, but also seemingly becoming a full robot at the end of the Security Breach gameplay trailer. So could this be what the games were about all along? AI taking over in a way. Penultimately, and at number 2, Jacko Origins. I love Grim Foxy. He's my favorite animatronic, especially design-wise. But what the hell is up with him and the couple other Jacko versions of the animatronics? And why doesn't Freddy have one? There has to be some form of explanation about it, I just can't figure out what it is. It could be that they were made for the Halloween festival we see in FNAF VR's Curse of Dreadbear expansion, but if that was the case, why were Jacko, Chica, and Bonnie introduced in FNAF 4's Halloween edition? I mean, like, I know that the actual real-world reason is because it was the Halloween edition, but come on, there has to be an in-universe reason. Especially since they were created in Crying Child's mind, at least to start with, and then were moved into not only Ultimate Custom Night, but FNAF VR as well. Like, how on earth did that happen? Who had to pull these strings to not only make these characters, but also get the idea from Crying Child's brain? Finally, in at number 1, the first. Some of the first animatronics built by William Afton featured claw mechanisms that were able to hide away items inside them. This line comes from the recent recently revealed unused Fast Facts list from FNAF AR's files. And honestly, this is one of the best Fast Facts we got, because thanks to this line, we know that William intended on killing even before acquiring Fredbear's Family Diner, or at least around the same time, since that was the first location, and the only animatronics we've seen with claw mechanisms are the ones from Sister Location. Baby is the only one we actually see use the claw, but with containment chambers being present in the others, we can assume the Fun Times also have them as well, which means that the Fun Times were made before they opened the first Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location, or around the same time before 1983 when William's kids got snatched. Hence why William was able to open up Circus Baby so quickly when he learned that Fazbear's was going to close. I mean, it was also obvious just based on the fact that his kids got snatched by a Funtime animatronic, since, you know, if you start killing because your kids die, why would you build robots to kill before they died? But still, it's an interesting line that makes for some interesting theory fodder.